Right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Lunch and Learn webinar with WhyMaker. We are so excited to have you here with us today. My name is Alejandra. I'll be your host. And today we are thrilled to spotlight one of our innovative partners, Robotical, a company designed and dedicated to making computer science, robotics, and problem solving accessible and engaging for students through hands-on learning. Robotical is best known for Marty the Robot, a programmable walking robot designed to help students learn coding, computational thinking, and engineering concepts in a fun and approachable way. Paired with their newest product, the Robotical Cog, Robotical's cross-curricular learning platform, Marty supports students as they explore everything from basic block coding to more advanced programming, all while encouraging creativity, collaboration, and curiosity. We are honored to be joined by Hal from Robotical. Thank you so much for being here today. We're excited to learn more about Marty and the Cog and how your tools are being used to support teachers and inspire students in classrooms around the world. Now, a quick note before we begin, we'll have time for Q&As at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go. Now, without further ado, Hal, the floor is all yours.
Wow, that's a fantastic introduction. I feel like we don't even need to talk about Marty now. You've said it all. Thanks everyone for being here. We're gonna cover COG a little bit more today because it's newer and maybe people are less familiar with that. Marty's been around for 10 years now. This is the 10th anniversary of Marty. We'll cover that a little bit at the end for anyone that's new and not familiar with Marty. But like she said, feel free to drop questions in. This webinar is really for you and for you to learn. And so anything that we can do to make that learning more enjoyable and more engaging, which is what we're all about, then feel free to drop those questions and comments into the chat. Um, as discussed, we're all about making learning fun and engaging, and bringing that interactivity in the real world, right? Computer science on the screen is awesome, but helping students learn computational thinking, computer science and robotics in the physical world and how hardware and software interact together is a real core principle of learning and also a way for students to be more engaging and have fun while they're learning. And as you can see, our technology is so approachable, right? We're really focused on making it fun and engaging and something that students want to use and almost kind of trick them into learning. As I mentioned, we've been around for 10 years. We are a Scottish company, so we started in the UK and then came to the US coming out of the pandemic in 2021. COG just started shipping last year, so relatively new. And then we have another new product coming out this year that's more focused on the science classroom and data collection, data science, and experiments. And so stay tuned for that. Maybe we can do another webinar in a few months and do a deeper dive on Axiom Science. So let's jump into COG. One of the things we notice is that there's just not a lot of computing tools for early elementary school, especially. And so that was a big gap. Also a gap that MIT noticed. And so they had a research project prior to the pandemic that was called Scratchbit. Sometimes it was also known as Pixel Play. That Craig Hanning was a researcher there, was looking about how to bridge that gap between creativity in the real world and creativity on the screen. With Scratch, the Lifelong Kindergarten Lab is the lab that was the inventor of Scratch. And so he created this research project. If I'm not mistaken, this was his PhD dissertation around a real simple device that would light up, would have a button and a few sensors, and then would interact in Scratch through an extension. And so I thought this was a really creative idea, but I thought the real killer app was, let's bring this to younger students in more of an easier programming environment, even easier than Scratch. And so that was really the inspiration behind creating COG. as a really simple introduction to inputs and outputs in physical computing. So early grades are all about teaching that cause and effect, and Cog is a great way to do that. It has a button, has 12 multicolor LEDs, has a couple of obstacle sensors to detect proximity, has a light sensor, a motion detector, and a rotational detector. And so all of those great capabilities, all in a really simple package that looks like something maybe Fisher Price would have made for kids to play with. It connects to the screen over Bluetooth, so it is interactive with the software, but you don't have to download any program to it. So you just pair it over Bluetooth, and immediately you can start programming and interacting with the different programming environments. You just need to power it. So you can power it with a USB-C cable or with two AA batteries. So there's a battery compartment built into the device to make that really simple. And you can imagine in the classroom, pairing can be a challenge, especially for the littles. And so we made it really simple by adding a QR code to each device. And so if the district allows you to have camera access, then you can use the camera to scan that QR code, and then the device will pair with that particular system. If the district does block the camera, no worries. We can still pair using a color pattern using the LEDs as a way to make that easier and simple. And as I mentioned before, I think the really killer app is to have this in a junior blocks programming environment. We also have traditional blocks with text and words, very similar to Scratch. But for pre-readers, this is a way for them to start programming with a junior block interface using pictures and icons. And you can use that just with the sprites on the screen. So sprites are little characters. Um, or if you also have Marty, the great thing is Marty and Cog can both interact with the software, which adds even more that you can do with both devices. Going to talk a little bit about the software because when teaching computing, computational thinking, and computer science, the software is really the critical aspect. We have software works pretty much on any device. For Chromebooks, Windows, and Macs, we go through a browser. It just needs to be a Chrome browser or an Edge browser. And there's the link to that application. There are no student logins. I know that can be a big concern, especially in New York. And there is no license fee for the software. So the software is free and included with the device. If you have tablets, which many early childhood classrooms have tablets, we also have an app for Apple iPads and Android tablets. Those are through the respective app stores. Just search for Robotical, and that should come up. Just like with Marty, we have put a lot of thought into the learning progression to make an easy on-ramp and to really get those quick wins for the students, but also quick wins for the educator. This is a subject that not every educator is comfortable with, and so the easier we can make to teach computing, the more they're going to build their confidence, and it's a win-win for both the student and the educator. Excuse me. So we do that first by just introducing some really simple games to get familiar with the device, get familiar with the sensors, get familiar with some of the basic commands like tilting the button, shaking, things of that nature. And so again, fun and engaging. And then from there, we move into what we call the code wheel. This is really the first introduction to inputs and outputs, the cause and effect. So that the yellow area are all of the inputs. So whether that's shake or tilt or button press or light sensor, they select their input. And then there are two output options, a color to light up the LEDs, and then a sound. And this is not yet drag and drop, so all they have to do is kind of scroll up and down or press the arrows up and down if they're on a computer. And even young kids can do that, and then get the immediate feedback of seeing Cog react to the commands that they put in the code wheel. From there, we move on to our Junior block interface, which will look very similar to Scratch Junior. So if you're using that, there's no need to kind of relearn the software editor. We have made it work in a browser, which if anyone's familiar with Scratch Junior, it's a little more complicated to try to get that working in a browser. So with all of the Chromebooks in schools nowadays, having browser-based software is really critical. And I mentioned there's two different ways you could use Cog. So on the left-hand side is how you would program a sprite. You'll notice the traditional sprite blocks are on the left-hand side, just like you would see in Scratch Junior. And then we've added three menus on the right-hand side that show all of the specific commands for Cog. The yellow is still event handlers, and then the magenta menu are the lights, and the green menu are sounds. And those are sounds coming from Cog itself. It does have an onboard speaker. If you want the sounds to come through the computer, then you would use the green commands from the left-hand side for the sprites. On the right-hand side of the screen here, um, we toggle into Marty mode, and the sprite now changes into Marty's head, and we have a bird's eye view looking down on the top of Marty the robot. So as Marty moves around in the classroom, the little Marty sprite is also going to move around on the screen. And then now within that little window, if you look, the menus on the left-hand side are no longer sprite commands, but these are commands to control Marty. So whether those are motions or lights on Marty or sounds coming through Marty, those are all the unique capabilities there. So same interface, again, don't have to relearn any of that, and just a simple toggle between sprite mode and Marty mode, depending on if you have just Cog by itself or Cog and Marty together. Similarly, as we move into our blocks interface, this is going to look very similar to Scratch, but we've added a new little panel on the right-hand side. So underneath your traditional sprite panel, there's a new panel for devices. And then that's where you would manage your devices, and you can pair multiple devices with your computer. And then each of the respective commands will then get associated with that device. Just like when you're programming a sprite, the blocks are um, object oriented with that sprite. Similarly here, the blocks are object oriented with the device, whether that's Cog or Marty. Left-hand side is just how you would program a sprite with Cog. Right-hand side, you see I've got two devices paired, both Cog and Marty, and then we have access to all the commands for those. Cog's really meant to be an introduction device and tool, so this may be the first exposure for some students to programming. We now have on-screen tutorials that are self-guided for the students. So embedded into the software, whether it's the tablet version or the web version, they can go to these on-screen tutorials and step through one at a time, and we'll give them particular suggestions and commands about how to build their program. And through these tutorials, they start to get more familiar with the features and capabilities of the device. These tutorials work for Cog by itself, for Cog and Marty together, for Marty by itself, as well as for junior blocks and regular blocks. So all kinds of tutorials. All these are free and included in the software. We maintained our sensor dashboard that we created for Marty, and so students have the ability to come in and see all of the sensor data in real time for Cog. This really helps make sensors more tangible, less abstract, and easier for both educators and students to understand. It can also be used as a debug tool if you're using sensors in the classroom to see, like, for example, how bright does the light need to be to trigger the light sensor, or how far away does an object need to be to trigger the proximity sensor, and things of that nature. Likewise, for Marty, we have machine learning capabilities for images and sounds. We now also have machine learning capabilities with Cog for gestures. So if people aren't that familiar with machine learning, this is the kind of underlying technology that many of the AI systems are based upon today. So if you're using some type of chatbot or sound keyword recognition, underneath the covers are a, a neural network that is been developed based on lots and lots of training data to train the model to be able to recognize various words, phrases, etc. And so we do the same thing with gestures. So imagine using Cog as a magic wand, or making different dances and having Cog recognize what dance you're performing based on the gestures that you're making with that. And so it's another great way to introduce the basics of this technology. The students collect their data using Cog as an input device, and then after their data is collected, they train the model. And once the model is generated, then they can go into their program and then actually use that model in the program. This is in the Blocks interface, by the way, not the Blocks Junior interface. So this would be a little bit for older students, kind of upper elementary or maybe middle school. It's available in two different configurations. We have a single package. So if you just want to buy one to try it out, that's $28. It's available on the WhyMaker website. As I mentioned, the software is included. And then for classroom sets, we sell in increments of 10, and then you'll also get 10 USB cables with that, and that's 275 and includes the software as well. So feel free to drop any questions in the chat about Cog, but we're going to move on to Marty, if that's okay. Marty is a real live walking, dancing, talking robot. It is pre-assembled, so this is less about building robotics, really more on the computational thinking and coding side. And we do provide free evaluation units to educators in the United States. So if this is something that you're interested and would consider purchasing from WhyMaker, feel free to grab that link there on the screen, and you can request an evaluation unit, and we'll give you training and make sure you feel comfortable with it to evaluate in the classroom for a couple of weeks. And we'll share that link a little later in the webinar as well. Uh, so Marty is loaded with all kinds of capabilities and sensors. I mentioned before, it is pre-assembled. It can talk. It can talk in multiple languages. Of course, the student has to program it to talk. This is not like a companion robot. This is a tool to learn computational thinking and coding. There are sensors on both feet. There's a color sensor that can detect colors, and then also infrared sensors that can detect objects and the ground below Marty. There's an accelerometer in Marty's head that can detect acceleration and change in motion. It can walk and dance. There are 24 programmable LEDs on the front of Marty, and then there's one programmable LED on the back of Marty. So a really robust set of features for a humanoid robot. And one of the key pieces of feedback that we get from educators is it's the most versatile robot they've ever seen. If you ask them, okay, if you can only have one robot, which robot would you pick? They say quite quickly that it would be Marty because of everything that it can do. We start with pre-K and kindergarten just out of the box using color cards. We call that unplugged mode, or some people may refer to it as screen-free mode. And so another way to just get those quick wins. You don't have to build it, don't have to put it together. Just put the battery in, lay out some color tiles, and the kids are leaning in, programming, troubleshooting, learning left and right, learning how to get the robot to stop, how to get it to go in the direction they want it to go. It's just amazing to see these younger kids um, when they get on the floor and start playing with Marty. From there, we move into the next step across our learning journey is a remote control, and we then introduce the concept of building a sequence of steps. This is not drag and drop programming yet. So this is designed a little bit for younger students that may not quite have the dexterity to do drag and drop, but they can still program by simply tapping or clicking individual commands. And then they'll get a graphical representation of that kind of in a racetrack of what do they want to do first, second, third, etc. And then when they're ready to execute their sequence, we introduce the concept of the green flag as a way to start the program. And then as we move into junior blocks, this is very similar to Scratch Junior. We keep the same concept of having the green flag as an event to start the program on, but we add additional capabilities for motion, lights, and sounds at that level. And then moving into full blocks interface, similar to Scratch, where we get much, much more granular control over Marty, outputs in the form of motion, lights, sound, and speech, and then input sensors, as I mentioned before. And then Marty is also programmable in Python using text-based coding. So you use your existing Python IDE and do a pip install to bring in the Marty library. It's called Marty Pi, and that will bring in all of the unique commands and capabilities for Marty into your Python IDE. Um, and you can also even embed a Raspberry Pi inside of Marty and execute the Python code directly off the Raspberry Pi and turn Marty into an autonomous robot untethered from another computing device. So as you can see, really, really versatile there. That can go all the way from color coding cards for 4-year-olds up to high school and even potentially higher ed with Python. Here's a little bit more of a graphical representation of what that progression looks like. So you can see your different grades and have a suggestion about the different coding environments that we suggest there. Likewise, we have over 100 lessons designed for educators to be able to deliver direct instruction to the classroom. And this is the scaffolding as we go across the different grades of the various computing concepts that we cover in those lessons. The lessons are also aligned with common standards. So all of the computing lessons aligned with CSTA. The math lessons are aligned with Common Core. Science lessons aligned with NGSS. And then we have a few state-specific alignments for Texas and Georgia. But what I find typically is almost every state for their computer science and computing standards are really closely aligned with CSTA. So for New York, I think that's definitely the case. So being aligned with CSTA should have you covered there. On our learning portal, you've got free access to all the lesson materials. Again, these are included, no teacher logins, no license fee. You can come in and execute each of the lessons sequentially, or if you're looking for a particular topic, we have filters built in on the left-hand side, and you can go in and pick the particular topic that you're interested in. You can also filter by coding environment, which I find really helpful if you want to do a lesson, let's say, on just using the color cards. You can come in and just filter the lessons and show all of the unplugged lessons. Or if you're in middle school and you want to do a lesson in blocks, you can come in and just filter and see all the block-based lessons. So really versatile. This is a learning tool, and so having learning capabilities is really first and foremost. Here's a quick example of what a typical lesson might look like. Alignments, learning objectives. Usually there's some type of warm-up activity, maybe a student worksheet or a teacher presentation, potentially starter code. Some of the lessons have little videos also to help illustrate the concepts. So full-blown lessons that you would expect a teacher to use in the classroom. I mentioned before that we had the on-screen student-led materials. We also have some analog versions in the form of coding cards that are designed to be simple step-by-step instructions for students to go through at their own pace. The digital version of these, the PDF, is free and available on our website at that link at the top. And then we do sell a printed booklet. So if you want us to print it, that's available from WhyMaker for $19.95. We talked a little bit about the sensor dashboard for Cog. For Marty, this is even more robust because Marty does have additional sensors and motors, and the sensor dashboard allows you to see all of that. As we get up into the middle school and high school grades, you can then export that data out of the sensor dashboard. And so if you want to have the students do more analysis on the data or use more visualization techniques, you've got access to the raw kind of tabular data through a spreadsheet for that. And then I also mentioned when we were talking about COG, the ability to do machine learning for sound and images. We have a really nice intuitive interface built into the Blocks coding environment. You just go to the machine learning tab, select whether or not you want to do an audio model or an image model, and then it walks you through the collection of the labeled data, the training of the model, and then once you have the trained model, you go back to the code tab, and there's a dedicated menu on how to do that. If people are curious, this little graph in the upper right-hand side is the loss plot. So the way machine learning works is it iterates to try to hone in on values in a neural network. And so this is a graphical representation of that iterative process. We iterate 100 times. That's called epochs in AI speak. And so you can see in this particular graph, the loss plot quickly goes from 1 down to 0 within about 10 epochs and then becomes asymptotic to 0. And so what that's telling us is the machine learning model thinks that it was able to get an accurately trained model based on the data that you gave it. So that's a nice little way, another tool to help students understand kind of what's going on under the hood for machine learning. If anyone is familiar with Teachable Machine, that's a website from Google. It's a software website, but it does have the ability to export a model. So if that's something that you're already using in your classroom, we had the added ability to then take that exported model out of Teachable Machine and then bring it into our software to program Marty. Also, if you have access to a 3D printer, one of the fun things to do is to print accessories for Marty. My personal favorite is the Stanley Cup, but you could have students design their own accessories and then print them out. And it's another way, I think I've seen so many of these maker spaces that have 3D printers and just aren't quite sure what to do with it. And this is a way to more physically connect it to a project and to Marty and how and what we could do with that in the robotics and computer science space. This is a little bit more of an overview of the learning materials. And then we do have a kind of a white paper presentation about the additional benefits, especially for students with special needs of humanoid robots, right? There's so many kind of wheeled robots out there, but having a humanoid robot really stands out. This is what many students expect a robot to look like. And especially for the students on the autism spectrum, it's a device that they can more easily relate to, and we even incorporate that into our teaching and learning materials as a tool to help teach social emotional learning because Marty can be programmed to emote by using like excited eyes or angry eyes or different expressions or different verbal commands that maybe a student is nonverbal but can give voice through Marty since Marty's able to be programmed to talk. Likewise, the classroom sets are available on the WhyMaker website. They do come in classroom sets of 5, 10, and 15. If you're on the WhyMaker page, there's a little selector kind of towards the left-hand side where you can select the size of the classroom pack. The classroom set of 5 comes with 5 robots, extra batteries, so we really didn't talk about that much. One of the really life-saving things about Marty in the classroom is you don't have to stress about battery management. Many other robots, you have to physically remove from instruction time to recharge them, where for Marty, if you buy the classroom packs, you'll get an extra battery for every robot and then an external charging cradle. So what you do is you just plug in the cradle, have it on a table or a desk with your extra batteries, and then anytime you need to replace the battery from Marty, you just swap it out during classroom time and keep going. So you don't skip a beat. The batteries last for over 3 hours and will recharge in about 2 hours in the cradle. Um, the classroom sets also come with a set of premium color tiles. So in addition to the paper color cards, we also have more of they're kind of like a mouse pad. They're neoprene rubber and cloth. So much more durable and they don't slide around as much. And we have what I think is the best warranty in the industry. So a 2-year warranty behind Marty. We really stand behind our product. It is comes with all metal gears and it is much more robust than it might look on initial glance. I think we're just trained to kind of see toys and all of the technology is hidden behind plastic, and so we expose a little bit more of that. But rest assured, Marty is robust, and we really back that up with our 2-year warranty. That 5 pack starts at 2,225, and then you can get increments of 10, 15, etc. As I mentioned before, now that I've piqued your curiosity about Marty, and you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to have one of these and test it out in my classroom. If you're in the US, go ahead and we'll share that link in the chat. And then we'll also follow up with an email with this link so that if this is something that you're interested, and it's no obligation, you will pay shipping both ways. It's not a high pressure sales tactic. It's just if you're wanting to evaluate a learning tool such as Marty, the way to do it is really to get hands-on and see how the students respond to it, take a look at the programming environments, take a look at the lessons, and then be able to make an informed decision. And I should add with that, WhyMaker, for those of you that are in New York, are an approved vendor on the BOCES list and New York City. And so they really take all of the hassle out of purchasing for New York, which can be a little cumbersome compared to other states, says the guy in Texas. But they really make it simple for New York-based schools to be able to purchase. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hal, for that engaging and informative presentation. It is so exciting to see how Marty and the Robotical Cog are just helping students build real world coding and problem solving skill through innovative lessons. So, as you mentioned, you for the audience tuned in right now, you can find your evaluation link in the chat right now, and we will also be sharing that link as well as a copy of this presentation recording via email. We will send you a follow-up email where you will find all of the links mentioned in this recording, as well as the evaluation link. Um, so yeah, now it's your turn. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat below, and we will answer answer as many as we can. Also, how I think it was beautiful. I think one of my personal questions as a former teacher, but you mentioned it already, how Marty and the Cog support students with different learning styles or varying levels of coding experience. So that is so wonderful that a company like yours also has them in mind, right? And just having all these different types of learning experiences for all of our students
Yes,
across the board.
we're a big believer in kind of constructionism and Seymour Papert. And so the concept of low floors, high ceilings, wide walls, we really take that to heart in everything that we do. And so making it easy and varying the different learning styles, learning resources, but then also being able to kind of provide that high ceiling for students that are looking for a little bit more of a challenge.
Yes. Another question along the lines of, sure, just trying to put my teacher hat on now. How does Marty the Robot fit into like an already full school day full of lessons? What is the flexibility that teachers have when using, the cog or the Marty lesson?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the particular grades.
Mm.
So for elementary schools, if you have maybe pullouts for library or pullout for computer lab, that's one place that we see Marty a lot. But then in the general classroom, because we do have cross-curricular lessons, this is a kind of an enrichment tool to be able to help reinforce some of those concepts in math science and ELA. And then typically once we get into middle school, you start seeing maybe more dedicated technology classes as a particular elective. That might be computer science, might be a general technology class, could even be robotics potentially. And so that's another good place for Marty to slot into the course schedule.
Amazing.
One thing I
Um,
know a lot of
yeah.
schools, especially kind of elementary and middle schools, it seems like when you mention robotics, they eventually think of a robotics competition
Hmm.
where we are a pre-built robot. So this is less about a competition and building a robot. But what I say is it's really more about a feeder program for your robotics competitions. So too often students feel more comfortable building and they gravitate to wanting to put things together and build the hardware side. And then everybody's looking at each other about, okay, who's going to program
Who's
this?
going to program it? Yeah. That's right.
Where we remove the building side and focus 100% on the computational thinking and the coding so that when they get to the age where they're now participating in a robotics competition, they've got more of that coding capability and the confidence to do the programming in addition to the building.
Yeah, you're building well-rounded students. I love that. And we like to ask this to all of our partners who come here and present for us. What kind of feedback have you received from teachers and students, particularly around engagement and confidence and just overall classroom collaboration?
Gosh, I mean that's really that's the banner for Marty. Um, I go to a lot of educator shows, as you can imagine, and occasionally an educator will bring along their child with them, which is really a joy. Usually, it's a younger student that maybe are not in the classroom, so 4 or 5 year olds maybe before they start kindergarten, and immediately I give them the color cards and Marty and just put them on the floor and step back and watch the magic happen. And it is. I had another vendor across from me just a couple of weeks ago that saw me do this and saw how engaging the student was, and he made a point of coming over and telling me of I've never seen a child that engaged so quickly with a learning tool. Like I said, if we kind of trick them, it's fun, but they are learning. And the troubleshooting, again, this was probably a 4, maybe 5 year old girl. Um, wasn't sure about left and right yet, wasn't sure about what colors did what, but through experimentation and um, that problem solving, it wasn't like they got things wrong. It was enough flow. Okay, that's what I'm thinking of. The concept of flow, where something's not too hard or not too easy. They were in that flow moment where, yes, it was a little challenging at first because they'd never done it before, but it was easy enough to where they could figure it out on their own. And then they get the sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that they did it. And that's something that's really hard to teach, right? It's not something that you can really just instruct. And so that I think is part of the joy of what Marty can bring to the classroom.
Oh, I love that. And you're right. Like, I think it's priceless when you capture their attention and they're learning by playing. So there's nothing
Yeah.
that beats that. We have a comment on the chat for one of our attendees that they met you at FETC and they're trying to find out how they can get more cogs.
Yeah. And so the girl that I was mentioning that was at FETC
Oh,
just
nice.
a couple of weeks ago. So you can purchase cogs from WhyMaker. So there's a link in the presentation. I think if you go to the shop portal on
Mhm.
WhyMaker, on the left-hand side, there's a filter for Robotical, and you can click on that. And then it'll give you the option to buy a single cog or a 10 pack of cogs.
Yeah, we're also happy to if you can if you want to connect with us, we can send you a quote and or help you the best way that we can to get cogs your way and as fast as possible. But yeah, if there are no more questions and or comments, I just want to say how what a fantastic discussion this was, and a huge thank you for everyone who participated and asked such thoughtful questions. We hope that this webinar has sparked new ideas for bringing robotics and coding into your classrooms in an engaging and approachable way. And if you're interested in learning more about Robotical and Marty the Robot or the Robotical Cog, you can find their products, as Hal said, now on the WhyMaker website. We are also available through the BOCES and the OGS. This is in New York State, so we help you with all of the purchasing side of things and fulfill it for you, making it easier for teachers. So, yeah, we encourage you to connect with us to explore how we can best help you bring these tools to support your instructional goals. And before we wrap up, don't forget to follow Robotical and WhyMaker on social media on the handles that you can see now on your screen for continued inspiration, classroom ideas, and STEM resources. And once again, thank you, Hal, for your presentation today and for all of you for joining us. And don't forget to subscribe on our newsletter so you don't miss our upcoming Lunch and Learn. We truly appreciate your commitment to empowering students through hands-on STEM and computer science learning. So have a lovely rest of your day, everyone, and we hope to see you all at our next Lunch and Learn webinar.
Right. Bye for now.